From the very first shot of A New Hope, audiences were introduced to a ship that redefined science fiction. A wedge of steel so massive it swallowed the screen and made the galaxy feel terrifyingly small. The Imperial Star Destroyer was not just a ship, it was a promise that the Empire was everywhere and that resistance would be crushed. That opening moment worked because the design was flawless, simple, bold, and immediately understandable. The triangle shape, the endless turbo lasers, the endless rows of stormtroopers waiting inside. It was efficiency turned into intimidation. No curves, no warmth, just cold steel pointing directly at you. And what makes it brilliant is that it was not just for show. Star Destroyers were carriers. Battleships and command hubs rolled into one. They could launch swarms of TIE fighters, invade planets, and enforce Imperial will, all without backup. They were the ultimate multitaskers of galactic warfare. Floating war machines that never needed to ask for help. But the genius goes deeper than the mechanics. The Star Destroyer became a cinematic icon. Every time one appeared on screen, you knew the stakes were high. You felt the weight of the Empire, not just through dialogue, but through design. It was world-building through geometry and scale. That is why decades later, the silhouette still inspires awe. Even when the sequels and spin-offs introduced new ships, the Star Destroyer remained the benchmark. It defined the Empire's identity the way a knight's armour defines a medieval kingdom. It told you everything about who they were and how they ruled. Fear through presence, power through design. In this video, we are going to break down why Star Destroyers were the best ships ever designed in Star Wars, how their presence shaped the Empire's identity, and why their legacy still dominates the way we imagine space battles to this day. The Imperial Star Destroyer is one of those designs that does not just look cool on screen, it defines the entire vibe of the Empire. From the very first shot of A New Hope, when that massive wedge-shaped silhouette swallowed up the screen, it told audiences everything they needed to know. The Empire was not subtle. It was massive, unstoppable, and designed to crush anything in its path. That is what makes the Star Destroyer special. It is not just a ship. It is a message. The brilliance of the wedge design is that it was not only intimidating, but practical. That sharp triangle shape allowed nearly every single gun on the ship to face forward in combat. That meant when a Star Destroyer bore down on you, it could unleash a devastating broadside of turbo lasers and ion cannons without having to maneuver awkwardly like a modern naval ship. The entire design was optimized for overwhelming frontal assault and intimidation. But Star Destroyers were more than just battleships. They were fully fledged carriers. Each one could house over 70 TIE fighters, dozens of bombers, and even ground assault vehicles like AT-AT Walkers. That made them self-contained invasion platforms. A single Star Destroyer could arrive at a planet launch fighters to secure orbit, then deploy walkers and stormtroopers to lock down the surface. No other ship class in Star Wars was that versatile. Then there is the sheer scale of the crew. A Star Destroyer carried more than 30,000 personnel, plus thousands of stormtroopers. It was not just a ship, it was a floating city. That made it a mobile symbol of the Empire's reach. Everywhere it went, it brought with it bureaucracy, logistics, and brute force. If the Senate failed to intimidate you, the arrival of one of these ships in orbit would do the job instantly. Even the interior design tells you something. Long, endless corridors in white and grey. Command bridges raised above the battlefield, so officers literally looked down on everyone else. Everything about the ship screamed hierarchy, order, and domination. Compare that to the Millennium Falcon, which felt lived in, grimy and personal. The Falcon was freedom and rebellion. The Star Destroyer was oppression in steel form. And that contrast made every shot of them on screen instantly iconic. The practical effect side of it also matters. The Star Destroyer model built for A New Hope was detailed down to the smallest pipes and panels. That craftsmanship gave it weight on screen. You believed it was a real ship. You felt its mass and scale even in miniature shots. That realism carried forward into every movie where Star Destroyers appeared. They were not just fantasy vessels. They looked functional. That credibility is why they stuck in pop culture. The sound design helped too. The low hum of its engines and the piercing scream of TIE fighters launching from its hangars created a sensory memory. You did not just see a Star Destroyer, you felt it. It was cinema doing world building at the highest level, and that is part of why these ships never faded from memory. They were designed not just to be vehicles, but to be experiences. One of the things that makes the Star Destroyer stand out is how it solved the problem of scale in galactic warfare. Star Wars is filled with small ships zipping around, X-Wings, Y-Wings, freighters, and smugglers. But the Empire needed something to enforce control across thousands of systems. It needed a ship that could be everywhere at once. The Star Destroyer became that answer, because these ships were not just battleships. They were mobile command centers. A fleet of them could patrol hyperspace lanes and crush piracy, or a single one could appear over a rebellious planet and enforce imperial will with nothing more than its presence. That flexibility was essential to the Empire's survival. Palpatine did not just rule through fear, he ruled through visibility, and nothing was more visible than a Star Destroyer blotting out the sky. The Empire also standardized them, which was genius in its own way. Every Star Destroyer looked the same. That made them instantly recognizable. You knew who was in charge the second you saw that dagger-shaped hull. It was brand identity for tyranny. And it made the galaxy feel smaller and more manageable because the Empire projected consistency everywhere. Wherever you went, the Star Destroyer was there to remind you that resistance was futile. But they were not invincible, and that is what makes them interesting. The rebellion was constantly punching above its weight against these giants. It took cunning strategy, surprise attacks, and sometimes raw luck to beat them. That turned the Star Destroyer into a perfect storytelling foil. It was a mountain for the heroes to climb. When one was destroyed in battle, it meant something because you understood the scale of what was toppled. Think about the Battle of Endor. When Admiral Akbar ordered the fleet to concentrate fire on the Executor, it was the destruction of a Star Destroyer taken to the extreme. A vessel so massive it dwarfed the others. When that ship fell, it was a symbolic moment. The image of something so enormous crashing into the Death Star captured exactly what the rebellion was all about. The little guys bringing down the impossible. The presence of Star Destroyers also shaped strategy. Rebel fleets were always scattered, hiding in small groups because they could not risk direct confrontation. That constant cat-and-mouse game created tension in the story. Without the looming threat of Star Destroyers, the rebellion would not have felt desperate. Their existence forced the heroes to stay creative and unpredictable, and that made the movies more exciting. Even the expanded universe leaned on this. In Legends books, entire storylines revolved around single Star Destroyers. You had rogue captains deserting the Empire with their ships, rebel spies sabotaging them, imperial commanders using them to carve out their own mini-empires. A single ship became the centerpiece of entire novels because it carried so much narrative weight. That is not something you can say about many sci-fi designs. At the heart of it, the Star Destroyer is the perfect marriage of form and function. Its wedge shape screams menace. Its arsenal backs it up. And its ability to serve as carrier cruiser and command hub makes it one of the most versatile designs in any science fiction franchise. But what really cements it as the best ship is the legacy it left behind. Every era of Star Wars kept coming back to the Star Destroyer template. In the prequels, we saw the Republic Venators, which were basically proto-Star Destroyers. In the original trilogy, we saw the design perfected into the Imperial class. In the sequels, we saw the First Order tweak the design, but never abandon it. That continuity shows just how iconic the silhouette had become. It was no longer just a military choice. It was cultural shorthand for power. And the variations proved the concept's strength. The Super Star Destroyer took the design and scaled it up to absurd levels, creating the Executor as the personal flagship of Darth Vader. The Interdictor added gravity well projectors that could pull ships out of hyperspace. Each variation added functionality without breaking the core wedge silhouette. That kind of modularity is rare in science fiction designs. It shows how robust the original idea was. Fans also responded to it in ways few designs ever achieve. Models, toys, video games, novels, and comics all leaned heavily on Star Destroyers. Kids grew up building them in Lego sets. Players grew up commanding them in strategy games. Writers built entire plots around them. They transcended the films to become part of the larger cultural imagination. That is the mark of a design that hits every note. And then there is the symbolism. The Death Star was ultimate destruction, but the Death Star was too big to be relatable. A Star Destroyer, though, was both terrifying and believable. You could imagine one showing up over your planet. You could imagine hearing the roar of TIE fighters pouring out of its hangars. That relatability is what made them scarier than the Death Star itself. It was tyranny you could see in the sky every day. Even in defeat, they left an impression. When Star Destroyers were destroyed in Return of the Jedi or Rogue One, those moments became cinematic highlights. Watching something that massive collapse was cathartic. It symbolized the crumbling of imperial dominance. And that kind of visual storytelling only works when the ship itself has earned that aura of invincibility. They also embody the cold efficiency of the Empire. Sleek, harsh, and practical. No wasted space. No flamboyant curves. Just raw functionality. They were the opposite of the Rebellion's kitbash starfighters. That clash in aesthetics made every battle instantly readable on screen. You did not need exposition. The ships themselves told the story. And that is why the Star Destroyer will always stand as the gold standard for Star Wars design. It was intimidating, functional, versatile, and symbolic all at once. It carried the Empire across the galaxy and carried Star Wars into cinematic history. No other design has done both so seamlessly.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.